The galaxy was never meant to know about them. That was the unspoken truth whispered between the ruling councils of alien empires, buried in archives that ordinary citizens would never read. Humanity had been warned: no colonies beyond the approved borders, no settlements on forbidden worlds. Yet still there was one place, one lonely human colony that dared to exist where the galaxies will said it could not. No one was supposed to find them. No one was supposed to survive there. But they did. The colony was small, isolated on a world surrounded by silence and hostility. To the galaxy's rulers, it was just a blip, an illegal spark to be snuffed out when convenient. To the people who lived there, it was everything. It was the last hope for those who had grown tired of bending to alien decrees, of being told what they could and could not be. And so, against the galaxy's will, they stayed. The first settlers had arrived under the cover of night, their ships hidden from the long-range eyes of alien patrols. They were farmers, builders, dreamers, and fighters all at once, carrying with them a single idea that burned brighter than any star: that humanity belonged wherever it chose to stand. They named the colony with no prideful ceremony, no grand declaration. It was just home. That word alone was enough. But home was fragile. Home was hunted. The galaxy was not blind forever. The first sign came as a flicker on their crude radar, a distant movement too slow to be natural, too deliberate to be chance. Whispers spread through the settlement. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Farmers set down their tools and stared at the sky, as if they could already see the shadow drawing closer. Soldiers, few as they were, sharpened their blades, cleaned their rifles, and prepared for the storm everyone knew was coming. They had no warships, no fleets, no allies. Just a colony of scattered buildings, people bound by stubbornness, and a belief that being human meant something worth fighting for. Against the galaxy, that belief was their only weapon. The aliens who ruled these stars had crushed rebellions before. To them, humanity was nothing more than a young species tolerated for its usefulness, a tolerated curiosity never allowed to step beyond its place. They expected compliance. They expected obedience. What they would find instead was defiance. The colony's leader stood on a broken balcony the night the first alien ship appeared in orbit. The glow of its engines painted the sky an unnatural red, a color that made the people below feel as if the world itself had caught fire. Silence filled the streets, broken only by the sound of children crying softly in the dark. Everyone knew what that ship meant. It wasn't a warning, it was a sentence. Still no one ran. The settlers gathered in the square, voices shaking but steady. Some wanted to plead for mercy, others whispered of escape, but more than half said the same thing: they would not bow. If this was to be their end, then it would be on their terms. They would show the galaxy that humans were not a mistake to be erased, but a flame that refused to go out. The first message from orbit was cold, metallic, stripped of emotion. It wasn't even delivered by a living voice, just a recording repeating the same command: abandon the colony or be destroyed. The words fell heavy across the crowd, but no one moved. No one surrendered. The silence that followed was heavier than the threat itself, as though the entire galaxy was waiting for their answer. The children asked questions their parents could not answer. Why couldn't they stay? Why couldn't they be left alone? Why did the galaxy hate them so much? And the parents, with tears burning in their eyes, told them the only truth they had: that sometimes being human meant standing when everything told you to kneel. At dawn, the alien ship descended lower, blotting out the stars with its massive shape. Dust swirled across the settlement as the ground shook beneath its shadow. The colony's defenders gathered at the edge of town, a ragged line of farmers and mechanics holding rifles that looked like toys compared to the ship above. Fear gripped them, but so did something stronger. Every human there knew the truth: they had no chance. The galaxy had decreed their erasure, and one ship was all it would take. But what the galaxy didn't know, what it could never understand, was the weight of desperation, the fury of a people who had been told they did not belong. The aliens thought they were facing a colony. They were wrong. They were facing humanity condensed into a single moment, sharpened into something unbreakable. The engines of the alien vessel roared as it prepared to land, and in that deafening sound came the question every colonist was asking in silence: would they live long enough to be remembered, or would their world be scrubbed from existence before a single story could be told? As the ship's shadow swallowed the last of the sun, a single voice cut through the crowd, steady and defiant: if they want our world, they'll have to take it from us. The words rippled through the people like fire through dry grass. And in that instant, the forbidden colony stopped being just a settlement. It became a symbol, a message carved into the stars themselves: humanity would not bow, not here, not now, not ever. But symbols do not stop weapons. Pride does not stop warships. And as the alien vessel's weapons came online, lighting the sky with a deadly glow, the colony braced itself for the storm. They did not know what would come next. They did not know if they would live to see another sunrise. But every heart beat with the same truth: they would face the galaxy together. And somewhere deep in the silence beyond the stars, something stirred, something the galaxy itself had not expected. Something that would make this forbidden colony more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The first shot had not yet been fired. The air was still heavy with anticipation. The future hung by a single thread, and in the distance, the sound of destiny was already approaching. Would one forbidden colony truly defy the will of the galaxy? Or would it be erased before the fight even began? The answer was coming. The colony had grown in secret, far from the main lanes of the galaxy, hidden between veils of gas and dust that swallowed the signals of passing fleets. 4 years the settlers lived quietly, building homes carved from stone and metal, raising families under skies filled with strange stars. They had no permission to be there, no empire had granted them the right, no council had allowed it. But the people didn't care. They were human, and being told where they could or couldn't live had always felt like a chain. So they broke it. What began as a handful of ships became something much greater. Generations were born into the soil of that forbidden world, calling it home with voices that carried both pride and defiance. They knew they weren't supposed to exist here, that the galaxy's laws would one day come crashing down upon them. Still they lived. They thrived. And in that growth they created something dangerous. Not weapons, not fleets, but a spirit the galaxy could not control. The elders often told the young about Earth, though none of them had ever seen it. To the children, Earth was less a real place and more a symbol of why they were here. A world that once birthed humans, then pushed them outward, and now gave them reason to claim their own place among the stars. The forbidden colony became not just survival but rebellion. Every harvest, every home built, every school and laugh of a child was proof that the galaxy's will could be defied. Yet shadows always hung close. The galaxy did not forget. Distant whispers reached the colony through broken signals and intercepted transmissions. Patrols moving closer, scouts sighted on the edge of nearby systems, talk of councils declaring new decrees about unlicensed settlement zones. The colonists heard these words like thunder far off, knowing the storm would one day arrive. And when it did, the galaxy would not come to negotiate. It would come to erase. Among the settlers there was always debate. Some said they should try to hide deeper, bury their transmissions, avoid detection as long as possible. Others believed running was no longer an option. They had already made their choice by planting roots in forbidden soil. If the galaxy came, they would have to stand. The quiet strength of this belief hardened over the years. And so, tools meant for farming were sometimes repurposed for defense. Old freighters were stripped down and rebuilt with armor plating, and young men and women trained not only in how to live on the land but also how to protect it. But behind every plan there was fear. The galaxy was vast, and their enemy was not a single fleet but an entire order, an empire of alien species united under law. The settlers had no illusions about their strength. They were one colony, one world. Against the galaxy they were small, laughably so. But even small things can carry weight, and humans had always been dangerous when cornered. The children grew up on stories not of peace but of resistance. Around fire pits and glowing screens, they learned of how their ancestors had stood against impossible odds, not because they expected to win, but because they refused to bow. These stories became part of their blood, seeping into their bones until even the youngest carried a spark of quiet defiance. The galaxy had called this place forbidden. The humans called it home. And no one would take that from them without a fight. As the colony expanded, something else began to happen. Something even more dangerous than defiance. They began to innovate. Out of necessity, with limited resources and little trade, they created new machines, crafted hybrid technologies that merged human designs with scraps scavenged from old wrecks. The result was unpredictable, sometimes unstable, but often brilliant. They weren't building fleets to rival the galaxy, but they were building something unique. Something that didn't follow the galaxy's rules. This innovation worried even the leaders of the colony. They knew what would happen if word spread. The Empire had always feared human unpredictability. To discover a hidden colony making its own technology, shaping its own path, it would not just be seen as a violation of law but as a threat. And threats, in the galaxy's eyes, had only one solution. The settlers didn't know when the day would come. They just knew it would. And so they lived every moment with tension coiled just beneath the surface, a life caught between the ordinary and the inevitable. They planted crops with hands that also built weapons. They laughed, married, raised children, while knowing warships might already be on the way. Every sunrise was beautiful, every night filled with stars. But the beauty was sharpened by the edge of fear, the awareness that this fragile world could be shattered at any time. The first real sign came quietly. A listening post, built in the ruins of an abandoned satellite, caught a transmission. It was short, distorted, but unmistakable. A patrol had found traces of human ships near the Forbidden Zone. The words were cold and official: prepare to investigate. Prepare to enforce. The colony's leaders gathered in silence. The room was filled with men and women who carried the weight of generations on their shoulders. They knew what the words meant. The galaxy had turned its gaze toward them. They were no longer hidden. The storm was closer. Fear moved through the colony like a silent wave. Parents looked at their children differently, holding them longer, whispering promises they weren't sure they could keep. Workers labored harder, knowing the days of peace were numbered. And somewhere deep inside, everyone began to prepare for the choice they would soon face. Some whispered that they should surrender, that perhaps the galaxy would show mercy if they bent the knee. But most knew better. The galaxy did not forgive. To exist here was already defiance. To admit it openly was to sign away their fate. And so the colony continued, outwardly calm but inwardly burning. Every person could feel it, the air heavy with unspoken tension, the ground beneath them alive with both fear and determination. They had built something here, something no decree or empire could erase. They had built a home. And when the galaxy came to take it, they would have to decide whether to run, to kneel, or to fight. On a quiet night, under alien skies, one of the youngest settlers climbed a hill overlooking the colony. Below, lights glowed warmly, families laughed behind walls, and machines hummed in the fields. But above, the stars glittered with a silent threat. Somewhere out there, ships were moving closer. Somewhere out there, the galaxy's hand was reaching for them. The child whispered softly into the wind, words carried away into the night. A promise, a defiance, a vow. And in that vow was the truth the galaxy had yet to understand. One forbidden colony was about to stand against the galaxy itself. The storm that had been brewing finally broke over the colony. Not a storm of weather, but one of ships, shadows, and silence that pressed down on every human heart. Above the valley skies, alien warships hung like waiting predators, their outlines sharp against the cold stars. Their arrival wasn't announced with weapons fire but with the suffocating certainty of dominance. The galaxy had finally come to reclaim what it believed was its own, and the colony that had stood against it will now face the weight of that defiance. On the ground, the settlers stood restless but unbroken. Families huddled together in their stone and steel shelters, eyes darting upward at the rumble that carried through the air. Children clutched their parents' hands tighter, sensing the fear that no one wanted to admit out loud. Soldiers patrolled the barricades they had built with their own hands, rifles charged, their faces grim with resolve. Yet even in that fear there was something deeper, something harder. They had survived hunger, storms, and endless nights of despair. If the galaxy thought it could scare them into surrender, it had miscalculated. In the command hall, the air buzzed with tension. Maps and transmissions littered the table, showing the overwhelming numbers closing in. The human defenders were outmatched, outgunned, and cut off from allies who dared not intervene. The galaxy had branded them forbidden, cursed, unworthy of existence. Yet here they stood, a colony of farmers, engineers, teachers, and dreamers, ordinary people forced into extraordinary defiance. The colony leader stared at the holographic projection of the enemy fleet, his voice steady but carrying the weight of fire. They think we're already beaten. They think our spirit is fragile. But they don't understand us. They've never understood us. His words weren't loud, but in that silence, they struck harder than any shouted command. Around him, men and women straightened their backs. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about proving that humanity's will could not be erased by force. But even as the speech stirred hearts, the reality of what loomed could not be ignored. Reports came in of alien squads landing beyond the mountains, cutting off escape routes. Entire skies shimmered with energy barriers, sealing the colony in. They were surrounded, yet there was no thought of surrender. Not because they believed they could win easily, but because surrender was no longer in their nature. And then came the message. A broadcast pushed through their channels, spoken in the cold, metallic tones of the alien high command. Forbidden humans. Your resistance has been noted. Your defiance will be ended. This is your final chance. Submit and your extinction may be delayed. Refuse and you will be erased tonight. The The silence afterward was heavier than any explosion. People looked at one another, waiting, searching for fear in each other's faces. Instead they found steel. One child whispered to her mother, "Are they going to take us away?" The mother pulled her close, voice soft but firm. "Not while we stand." The defenders made ready. Every generator was fueled, every weapon checked, every path reinforced. Civilians carried supplies to the bunkers, but they did so not with panic, but with a grim determination that spoke of something greater than survival. This wasn't about one colony anymore. It was about every human everywhere who had ever been told they were not enough. Night fell and with it the sky burned. Alien ships descended in waves, their lights cutting through the darkness like knives. The ground trembled with the force of their landing. From the ridges came the first clash, explosions lighting up the horizon, weapons fire echoing through the valley like thunder. The forbidden colony had become a battlefield, and humanity's stand was beginning. The first hours were chaos. The aliens came with precision, their machines slicing through barricades, their weapons scorching the earth. But the humans fought with something different. They fought with fury, with desperation, with the knowledge that losing meant more than death. It meant erasure. They turned every street into a trap, every building into a shield. Farmers fired from rooftops, engineers rigged explosives in tunnels, children carried messages through the chaos when signals were jammed. And still the aliens pressed forward. Their numbers seemed endless, their strategy merciless. Every time the defenders pushed them back, more ships descended. Every time a human squad stood their ground, alien reinforcements crushed down like a tidal wave. The colony was bleeding, its people breaking under the weight of the galaxy's wrath. But they did not break entirely. For every loss, a dozen more voices rose in defiance. As the battle stretched on, whispers spread among the soldiers, that the aliens were not here merely to crush them. They were afraid. Afraid of what this colony represented. Afraid of a single human spark spreading across the galaxy, igniting rebellion in every world forced to kneel. That fear was the humans' greatest weapon, even if they didn't yet know how to use it. In the heart of the colony, as the command center shook under bombardment, the leader gathered his closest fighters. His voice carried the weight of both despair and hope. "They want us erased because we dared to exist on our own terms. They want to bury us under silence. But hear me now, they will not silence us. Even if this colony burns tonight, our defiance will echo through every star. We will make sure of it." The words struck deep, but so did the reality. Ammunition was running low. Defenses were failing. The colony was nearing the breaking point. And just as the defenders steeled themselves for the next wave, something unexpected stirred. From the mountains came a burst of fire unlike anything seen before, cutting across the alien advance. The ground shook with the force of new explosions, but these weren't human-made. For a moment, both sides froze. The defenders stared, hearts pounding, as a hidden force revealed itself from the shadows of the valley. The aliens faltered, their formations breaking, their certainty shaken. A new twist had entered the battle, one that neither human nor alien had fully seen coming. And as the skies lit up with the clash of fire and steel, the humans felt the tide of the fight shift. Not in victory, not yet, but in possibility. Something greater was moving, and the climax of their struggle was about to unfold. The stars over the forbidden colony burned brighter than ever, but no one on the ground looked at them with wonder anymore. They were not lights in the night sky, they were warnings. Signals of warships moving, fleets gathering, empires converging. The galaxy was coming for them, and the people of this single outlawed human colony knew it. Fear spread quietly through the streets, but so did something else: defiance. They had chosen exile to build a life of their own, and now the galaxy wanted to tear it away. The colony leaders gathered in the underground chambers, their faces grim in the dim glow of flickering lights. They had already survived starvation, storms, and the crushing loneliness of being cut off from the rest of humanity. But this was different. The alien coalition arrayed against them was vast, united in their hatred of humanity's refusal to obey. The council whispered of survival, but every voice trembled, as though the air itself carried the weight of doom. Outside, soldiers trained endlessly. Farmers put down tools and learned to fire weapons. Children were sent to bunkers, their laughter replaced by hushed whispers. Everyone felt it, the approach of something too big to stop. And yet, instead of breaking them, it seemed to forge them tighter together. Every hand on the colony was now preparing for the inevitable clash, for the grand war that would decide not only their future but humanity's place in the galaxy. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said the enemy had already sent infiltrators, saboteurs who walked among them, waiting for the right moment to strike. Others swore they'd seen alien ships cloaked in the high atmosphere, watching every movement below. The colony's communications had gone silent weeks ago, no messages in or out. They were alone. But deep beneath the colony, hidden in a cavern carved out long ago, lay something few outside the highest circle knew about. A warship. Not a fleet, not an armada, just one ship. Human-made, illegal under galactic law and unfinished. It was massive, bristling with untested weapons, the result of decades of secret work. Its presence was the colony's greatest hope and their greatest danger. If the galaxy discovered it before it was ready, they would rain fire until nothing remained. The engineers worked without rest, their hands bleeding, their voices raw from endless arguments. Could one ship truly stand against an empire? The idea seemed impossible. Yet history had shown again and again that humans, when cornered, could do the impossible. And so they pushed on, each bolt tightened, each system tested, each weapon calibrated. Every beat of their hearts echoed with the same thought: survive. The aliens, too, felt the tension. Across the galaxy, messages circulated within the coalition. They called the colony a stain, a violation of order. To them, humanity's defiance threatened the delicate balance of power. If one forbidden colony could reject galactic law and endure, others might follow. And so they swore not only to crush the humans but to make their destruction a message that would echo for centuries. Armadas gathered. Commanders sharpened their strategies. They believed overwhelming force would bring quick victory. But humans were not planning to meet them with fear. Night fell on the colony, and the skies trembled with strange lights, flashes of engines far above. The people stared up in silence, their hearts racing. Was this it? Was this the beginning? No ships descended, but the warning was clear. The galaxy was watching. Then came the second blow. Scouts returned with news that shattered what little calm remained. The coalition wasn't just sending warships. They were building a blockade, a wall of steel and fire meant to trap the colony until starvation broke them. It was a slow death, meant to crush hope before the final assault. The council argued through the night. Some wanted to send envoys to beg for mercy, but most knew the truth: mercy would never come. The aliens would never allow humans to stand free. And so the choice became clear. They would not wait to starve. They would fight. The warship deep below was their only chance. But as the engineers prepared it for launch, a discovery rocked the colony to its core. Buried within the ship's systems was something no one had expected. A hidden design, a weapon unlike anything seen before. It wasn't meant for defense. It was meant for annihilation. Whoever had built it had left humanity a terrible gift. Something that could tear through fleets but at a cost no one wanted to imagine. The council was split. Some said they had no choice. Others feared that using such a weapon would only prove the aliens right, that humans were monsters too dangerous to exist. The people whispered of it in fear, calling it both their salvation and their curse. But before the council could decide, alarms blared across the colony. Enemy signals had appeared in orbit, closer than ever before. The coalition wasn't waiting. The blockade was tightening. Within hours, no ship would escape. The war had already begun. Panic rippled through the streets, but it quickly hardened into something else: anger. They had come too far, lost too much, to let their lives be stolen now. Families gathered together, holding each other close, whispering promises that no matter what happened, they would not be forgotten. Soldiers loaded weapons with trembling hands but steady eyes. Engineers rushed to the underground bay, knowing the warship had to launch now or never. As the first alien ships descended, fire streaked across the sky. The colony shook with the thunder of bombardment, buildings crumbling, earth splitting. The people scattered into shelters, hearts pounding with terror. But beneath it all, the warship stirred, engines igniting with a roar that seemed to shake the galaxy itself. Above the chaos, the coalition fleet tightened its net. Their commanders spoke with certainty. This would be quick. This would be brutal. Humanity would be erased here forever. But they had underestimated the forbidden colony. They had underestimated the power of desperation, of unity, of survival. As the ground burned and the air filled with ash, the warship rose, its shadow swallowing the colony below. One ship against an empire. One last stand in a galaxy that wanted them gone. And in that moment, as the enemy closed in and the colony's fate balanced on a knife's edge, the people of the forbidden world knew the Grand War was no longer just about survival. It was about proving once again that humanity would never bow. The engines roared louder, the sky lit with alien fire, and the warship pointed itself toward the heart of the enemy fleet. And the galaxy, watching from every corner, held its breath. The colony trembled under the roar of the galaxy's war machines. From the mountains to the deep seas, the ground shook with every thunderous blast of alien firepower. The sky was scarred with trails of burning ships, human and alien alike, crashing in flames. What had begun as a single forbidden settlement had now turned into the spark of a grand war that no one in the galaxy could ignore. The people of the colony fought with everything they had. Farmers who had once tilled the soil now stood behind makeshift barricades with rifles in their hands. Children who had never seen a battlefield watched their parents step into fire they had no right to survive, yet they did. The aliens came in endless waves, armored, disciplined, with fleets that stretched across the horizon. But still the humans refused to bow. They fought in the ruins of their homes, in the forests where their ancestors had planted the first seeds, in the very streets they had built with their own hands. Every step forward for the enemy was paid with their blood. The alien empire had believed this battle would be simple, swift. But the resistance spread. Other colonies, long silent under the empire's rule, began to hear the call. Messages slipped through the void. Hidden human outposts emerged from the shadows. A spark of rebellion raced across the stars. The forbidden colony had become a symbol, and symbols could not be destroyed so easily. But the empire had not shown its full hand. Above the battlefield, hidden within a colossal warship, the enemy had kept a weapon no human had ever faced. It was not just firepower. It was something darker. Something that reached into the mind. As the humans pressed forward, desperate to turn the tide, the weapon was unleashed. Suddenly the defenders staggered, clutching their heads as whispers filled their thoughts. Memories twisted, voices of long-lost loved ones called out to them, pleading, begging them to surrender. The Empire had found a way to use memory itself as a weapon. They sought to break the humans not by force, but by turning their own hearts against them. But the Forbidden Colony was no ordinary place. These people had chosen exile, had chosen hardship, had chosen to live outside the reach of the galaxy's will. Their strength was not born in comfort. It was born in sacrifice, in the shared fire of struggle. The weapon tore at them, but instead of breaking, it revealed something the aliens had never understood. Humans were not afraid of pain, nor of memory. They carried their scars like shields. The whispers that should have shattered them became reminders of why they fought. Every face called into their minds only sharpened their will. The enemy fleet moved closer, pressing hard, sensing the humans still wavered. The grand war thundered in every direction, ships colliding in the void, plasma fire tearing holes in the night. The colony's defenders, bloodied but unbroken, made their stand. They had almost nothing left, only one final strike to give. From the colony's hidden hangars, old ships rose into the sky. They were rusted, barely held together, machines that no sane commander would send into battle. But each was filled with people who refused to quit. They dove into the alien fleet with reckless courage, not to win but to buy moments, precious moments. They hurled themselves against the Empire's warships like sparks thrown into a storm. And in the middle of this storm, the final twist revealed itself. For centuries, humanity had believed they were alone in exile. But as the enemy pushed harder, signals broke through the interference. Not just from nearby colonies, not just from the scattered remnants of humanity across the stars. These came from deep space. From places no one had dared to look. Entire lost human fleets, forgotten in the tides of history, emerged from the void. They had survived in silence, building, waiting, hidden from the Empire's gaze. Now, at the darkest moment, they returned. The galaxy had thought this was only one colony defying them. But now it was clear. It was humanity itself. The battle surged into chaos. Human fleets clashed with alien armadas in a storm of fire and steel. The Empire's great weapon faltered, its whispers drowned beneath the roar of millions of voices united. Ships collided in brilliant explosions that lit up the skies above the Forbidden Colony. Every alien strike was met with fury. Every human loss only deepened the resolve of the living. The climax of the Grand War came like a storm breaking. The Forbidden Colony stood battered, burning, but unyielding. Humanity had revealed its strength not just in weapons, but in the impossible act of enduring. The Empire, for the first time in its history, was shaken to its core. And then came the final twist. The Forbidden Colony itself was not just a home. Buried deep beneath its surface, hidden even from its own settlers, lay the ruins of an ancient machine, older than the Empire, older than any known civilization. The colony had not been chosen by accident. It had been built upon a secret that had waited for the right moment, the right people, to awaken it. As the last wave of alien ships descended, the machine stirred, pulsing with a light no one could explain. The humans, desperate, turned to it not with fear but with hope. Whatever it was, it had chosen them. The sky split open as its power surged, rewriting the battlefield in a single breath. The forbidden colony had defied the galaxy's will. But now it was no longer just a colony. It had become something far greater, something that would change the fate of humans and aliens alike forever. The silence after the Grand War felt heavier than the thunder of all the battles combined. The stars stretched endless above the forbidden colony, quiet now, no longer torn apart by streaks of alien fire or the burning trails of human defiance. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was no roar of engines, no screams of ships breaking apart, no echo of orders shouted in desperation. Only the raw, hollow stillness that came when victory had cost too much to celebrate. The colony had survived. Against the galaxy's will, against an empire that believed no single human world had the right to exist, they had stood. The warships were gone, their fleets shattered and drifting in silence, but the scars were everywhere. Fields once rich with green lay scarred by plasma burns. Towers that had scraped the sky were broken into husks. Yet the people who had endured, those who had carried the fight through every hopeless hour, still stood. Their survival was not only a victory, it was defiance carved into the bones of the galaxy itself. But survival was never simple. Even as word spread through the stars that a single human colony had stood against the Empire, unease rippled through the survivors. They wondered what the galaxy would do next. Would the Empire lick its wounds and return with fury, unwilling to let their authority be broken? Or would the other alien powers, long silent and watchful, finally step from the shadows? Humanity had shown what it could do when cornered. And that truth terrified not only their enemies, but even some of the humans themselves. People whispered that the war had changed them. That fighting so long, so desperately, had awakened something raw and unyielding inside them. They had faced extinction and in doing so, discovered just how far humans were willing to go to live free. No empire, no order, no ancient galactic decree had the power to strip them of that truth anymore. The survivors gathered in the colony square, where once festivals had filled the air with music and laughter. Now it was a place of remembrance, firelight casting long shadows as voices trembled with grief and pride. They spoke of those who had fallen, names carried by the wind, faces etched into memory. Children clung to their parents, wide-eyed, trying to understand the meaning of sacrifice. Elders, their shoulders stooped from years of labor and war, wept openly, not out of weakness but from the weight of all they had carried. The leaders, those who had guided the resistance, stood among their people, not above them. No titles mattered anymore. They had fought not for glory, not for rank, but for each other. One of them spoke, their voice steady though their hands shook with exhaustion. They reminded everyone that the fight had never been about destroying the Empire. It had always been about proving that humanity could not be silenced, that even one small colony could stand against the will of countless stars if they stood together. Yet as the crowd listened, a new truth became clear. The Grand War might have ended here, but it was not over everywhere. News would spread, carried by whispers, stolen signals, and the drifting debris of shattered fleets. Other human settlements, hidden and scattered across the galaxy, would hear. They would know that one colony had defied the Empire, and one. Hope would spark in places that had long been silent. Rebellion would stir. And with it the galaxy would shift. But the price of defiance was written in blood. Survivors knew the battles had left deep wounds, not only in their cities but in their hearts. Families torn apart, friends buried in the ashes of war. Those scars would not fade quickly if they ever did. Some people feared that humanity had lost more than it had gained, that freedom had cost too much. Others, though, believed those sacrifices had ensured that their children would live without chains. Both truths weighed heavy and both would remain. As night stretched over the colony, the stars seemed closer somehow, as though they were listening. For the first time, the survivors did not look upon them with fear. The galaxy was vast, full of powers older and larger than they could imagine, but the war had proven something no empire could deny. A single forbidden colony had stood against the galaxy's will. And in that defiance, humanity had carved a place for itself in the universe. The final twist came not in battle, but in discovery. As engineers combed through the wreckage of alien ships, they found records, data caches and fragments of intercepted transmissions. Among them was something unexpected. The Empire had not acted alone. Another power, hidden and silent, had urged them to crush the humans quickly. A shadow force, older than the Empire itself, had feared what humanity might become if given the chance to grow. The war had not just been about rebellion. It had been about fear, fear of the human spirit, fear of a species that refused to bow. That truth shook the survivors even more than victory had. Somewhere beyond the stars, something greater was watching, waiting, and dreading what humans might one day rise to be. The war was not the end. It was only the beginning of a larger struggle, one that stretched far beyond a single colony or even a single empire. Humanity had been noticed. Still, in that moment they chose to rest, to rebuild, to hold their children close and let laughter return in small sparks, even if it felt fragile. The colony would plant its fields again, raise its homes from the ruins, and sing its songs not as a whisper of defiance, but as a declaration of survival. They knew the galaxy would come again, maybe sooner than they wished. But they also knew one truth that could never be taken away. When faced with impossible odds, when pressed to the edge of extinction, humanity had not broken. It had endured. And so the story of the Grand War ended not with despair, but with hope lit like a flame carried into the dark. The colony's people stood beneath the stars, weary but unyielding, their hearts bound together by everything they had lost and everything they had gained. They were ready for whatever would come next, not because they had won a war, but because they had proven to themselves what it meant to be human in a galaxy that had tried to erase them. The Empire had fallen back, licking its wounds. The shadows beyond the stars stirred with unease. And the forbidden colony, once small and forgotten, now stood as a symbol for all of humanity. A reminder that freedom was not granted, it was fought for. That even against the weight of the galaxy's will, the human spirit could not be crushed. And as dawn rose over their battered world, painting the sky in light, they carried that truth with them into whatever future awaited, unbroken, unafraid, and unbound.